Dennis Rader, known as the BTK Killer, bind, torture, kill, terrorized Wichita, Kansas, between 1974 and 1991. He murdered 10 people, including men, women, and children, by binding, torturing, and strangling them in their homes. Rader took pleasure in taunting the police and media with letters and detailed descriptions of his crimes, seeking notoriety. Despite his horrific acts, Rader led a double life as a family man and church president, which helped him evade suspicion for years. His downfall came in 2004, when he resumed sending taunting messages after a long hiatus. In one of his communications, Rader asked police if they could trace a floppy disk back to him. Authorities replied, falsely, that they could not, and Rader sent the disk. Investigators used metadata from the floppy disk to trace it to his church, leading to his arrest in 2005. DNA evidence linked him to the murders, and he confessed in detail during his trial, receiving 10 consecutive life sentences. Gary Ridgway, known as the Green River Killer, is one of the most prolific serial killers in U.S. history. Active mainly during the 1980s and 1990s, he murdered at least 49 women, though he later confessed to killing over 70. Ridgway targeted vulnerable women, often sex workers in the Seattle area, strangling them and disposing of their bodies near the Green River. Ridgway evaded capture for decades, but in 2001, advancements in DNA technology linked him to several victims through evidence collected in the 1980s. After his arrest, Ridgway cooperated with authorities, leading them to more victims' remains. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole in 2003. David Berkowitz, the son of Sam, committed a series of murders that left New York City in a state of panic during the mid-1970s. From July 1976 to July 1977, Berkowitz killed 6 people and wounded 7 others in a string of shootings. He primarily targeted young women with long, dark hair, often while they were sitting in parked cars with their companions. His attacks were random and occurred late at night, which heightened the fear across the city. Women even began cutting or dyeing their hair in an attempt to avoid being targeted. Berkowitz gained additional notoriety by sending taunting letters to the police and media, referring to himself as the son of Sam. In these letters, he claimed that he was under the influence of a demonic force, supposedly transmitted through his neighbor's dog, which he said commanded him to kill. His strange claims and erratic behavior fueled the widespread media frenzy surrounding the case. The intense police investigation culminated in Berkowitz's capture on August 10, 1977. His downfall came after a witness noticed a suspicious person near the scene of one of the shootings and noted the license plate number of a car parked nearby. Police traced the plate to Berkowitz, who had received a parking ticket near one of the crime scenes. When they approached his apartment, Berkowitz calmly greeted the officers and immediately confessed to being the son of Sam. After his arrest, Berkowitz underwent psychiatric evaluations, but he was ultimately deemed fit to stand trial. In 1978, he pled guilty to all the murders and was sentenced to 6 consecutive life terms. During his time in prison, Berkowitz has claimed to have found religion, referring to himself as the Son of Hope. However, his infamy as the son of Sam remains one of the most chilling examples of random, terror-driven violence in American history. Born in 1906 in La Crosse, Wisconsin, Ed Gein grew up in a highly dysfunctional family dominated by his fanatically religious and abusive mother, Augusta. She instilled in him a deep contempt for women, except for herself, and this relationship had a lasting and damaging effect on Gein's mental state. Gein lived a mostly isolated life on a farm in Plainfield, Wisconsin, after his mother's death in 1945. His descent into madness intensified as he became obsessed with human anatomy and death. In 1957, police discovered Gein's horrific activities while investigating the disappearance of Bernice Warden, a local hardware store owner. When they searched his farmhouse, they uncovered Warden's decapitated body, along with a gruesome collection of human remains. Gein had created household items such as lampshades, clothing, masks, and furniture from the skin and bones of his victims, and the bodies he had exhumed from local graves. Though Gein confessed to killing 2 women, Bernice Worden and tavern owner Mary Hogan, much of his infamy stems from his grave robbing and the ghastly objects he crafted from corpses. He admitted to making suits from the skin of women, which he would wear in an attempt to become his deceased mother, highlighting the deep psychological trauma that influenced his crimes. Ed Gein was arrested in 1957 and found mentally incompetent to stand trial. He was diagnosed with schizophrenia and spent the rest of his life in mental health institutions. In 1968, he was declared fit for trial, found guilty, but remained in a psychiatric facility, where he died in 1984. Richard Ramirez, known as the Night Stalker, was a notorious American serial killer who terrorized Southern California from 1984 to 1985. Born in 1960 in El Paso, Texas, Ramirez had a troubled childhood marked by exposure to violence and drug use, which contributed to his violent tendencies as an adult. Ramirez's crime spree included at least 14 murders and numerous assaults, with victims ranging from young children to the elderly. His attacks were particularly brutal and often committed during home invasions. Ramirez showed no consistent pattern in choosing his victims, making his crimes even more terrifying for the public. He frequently left satanic symbols at crime scenes, fueling his reputation as a Satanist, and expressed no remorse for his actions. Ramirez was eventually caught in August 1985, after a group of residents in East Los Angeles recognized him from a police sketch and subdued him until the police arrived. In 1989, he was convicted of 13 murders, 5 attempted murders, and 11 sexual assaults, among other crimes, and was sentenced to death. Ramirez remained on death row until his death from complications of cancer in 2013.